Hello and welcome back to PPMA TV with me, Andy Fitzsimons. Really delighted to have John Arnold with us today. John is a political consultant, 25 years plus in the business, so probably you've seen a lot.
I have.
I suppose the first question, John, does it get any better or worse conversely than it is now?
Well, Andy, interesting times we live in. Thank you very much for the invitation to come here today. I think the conference has been fantastic. I really enjoyed it. But since I came into public affairs, what people know as sort of political lobbying in your parlance, which is probably just after the Second World War, right enough, feels that long ago to me, I think this is one of the most interesting times we've ever had. Politically, no Prime Minister with a big majority, no political party with a big majority, and a huge issue which splits the country. Diversified opinions in parties, cross parties, in the public, in families. It's never been more interesting. And what I'll say is, Boris Johnson talks about the 31st of October, do or die to get a deal or a no deal. I think this is going to go on for a lot longer than that. I think it'll be after the 31st of October. I think, you and I can be talking every year for the next 5 or 6 years, and we'll be talking about Brexit, we'll be talking about our relationship with the EU, the trade deals, and your members need to probably think about that moving forward and how they plan and prepare for that.
Is there any question that we won't leave or will leave on the 31st of October?
I think my understanding, I saw Boris's speech today, and I've seen what I think the proposals are that the UK government are going to present to the European Union. I think there's not a cat in hell's chance of those proposals being accepted by the Irish government and the European Union. I think they will be a basis for discussions, but let's be really honest, and you and I can be honest, Chatham House rules, we'll keep it all quiet. It's the blame game we're in now, and Boris Johnson wants to negotiate with the European Union so he can say that I negotiated in good faith. The European Union want to negotiate with Boris Johnson so that when they get to that European summit on the 17th and 18th of October, there won't be a deal, but both of them can point at the other one and say it's their fault. I think there is no chance, in my opinion, of a deal happening. I think Boris will come back and say, I promised to get us out on the 31st of October. We're going out on a no deal. I think Parliament will say, excuse me, we've got legislation which says you've got to write to the EU and ask for an extension. I think he'll look for a mechanism, a wheeze if you like, to say, I don't need to do that, I'm not doing that. I think they'll end up in court again. Boris hasn't got a successful track record in court of late. So I would be suggesting that he'll be either be forced to write, asking for an extension, or someone on his behalf, whether it's in the government or the court itself, is forced to write. I think the European Union will offer an extension. It may not be to the 31st of January. I think it'll probably be longer than that, because they'll probably say, it looks like you're going to have an election soon. Why don't you have that election and then give it a good couple of months or more to actually negotiate? So I would say watch this space, but it could be the end of April, end of May.
It's incredible, really, isn't it? I mean, we kind of go back to 2016, of course, when we had the whole referendum, and we look at the ballot papers and it said, essentially, do you want to remain in the EU or do you want to come out of the EU? And really, to the average person, what did that actually mean? I mean, if people actually had a sheet which actually said, well, this is the bit that we're leaving and this is the bit that we will remain, I think people would maybe have to make a better informed decision. It seems crazy that actually something which was seemingly on a ballot paper was so simple has enabled this complexity that we're in now.
I absolutely agree. I think there's a number of facets to this. I think when the legislation for the referendum was laid, should there have been a threshold? So you've got 60% to leave, and that ensues that we leave, or David Cameron left it at a simple majority. The country was always going to be pretty split on this. If you look at referendum in other countries, there's usually a threshold. I think that was probably a mistake. when it comes to the negotiating or campaigning on the actual issues, a lot of the stuff, and it's the necessity of political campaigns, the reality of those campaigns and the reality of what actually will happen are somewhat different. We look at the £350 million on the side of the bus for the NHS, and we look at some of the Leave campaigners who said it'll be easy to get a deal from the EU, and we look at some of them who wanted different types of leave. And I think that's the problem. If all the Conservative MPs had voted for Theresa May's deal, she'd have got it through. It wouldn't have been a problem. But within the Conservative Party at that time, there is a hardcore who wouldn't accept any form of deal with the EU, and probably still won't under Boris. And that, I think, if there was a miracle and he did bring a deal back, I think he'd have trouble getting it through the House of Commons without quite a few Labour MPs voting for it, which is problematic given the politics of the last 3 or 4 weeks.
And how likelihood is it that, under Boris's current premiership, that he'll even be in situ come what, the 31st of October?
And that, I think, is the point about, is he going to be no confidence, and therefore does an opposition figure, Jeremy Corbyn, or a Ken Clarke, a Harriet Harman, a Margaret Beckett, be asked by other party leaders to form what's called a government of national unity? How it's a national unity government, given that there's half the population don't support it, I don't know, but it is possible. I don't think it'll happen, is my honest view. I think we won't leave on the 31st. He'll be forced, and he'll blame the Europeans or the terrible lawyers or the terrible politicians to write and seek an extension. I think the Labour Party at that point will support a general election, and I think there'll be a general election on the 28th of November. Now, you'll find tonight when Laura Kuenssberg speaks on the 10 o'clock news, something completely different happens, and you'll say that shows you how much John Arnold knows. But politics is so febrile at the moment and things change so quickly. I would say that is the likely scenario, that Thursday, the 28th of November, we're likely to go to the polls.
I mean, it's difficult enough for an individual, isn't it, following Brexit on television, and, as you've already alluded to, it almost changes on a bi-daily basis. Actually running a business and trying to plan for the eventuality of what may or may not be, is just a precarious position to be in, isn't it?
I really feel for companies who particularly trade with Europe and have a supply chain which is dependent on a free-flowing, tariff-free border, because they've had the 31st of March deadline, which a lot of businesses built up backlog, built up supplies in the anticipation, okay, if we do go to a no deal, I've got to be secure in my supply chain. They then work through that through the summer, and now they're looking at another cliff edge vote, and it could go to a no deal on the 31st. Do they prepare for that again? Some businesses are. Some are taking a chance that there will be a deal or we'll get an extension. I really feel for them. And I've spoken to businesses who are big businesses, some on the FTSE 100, and I've spoken to small businesses, and they're all facing the same problems. And the problems are bigger for SMEs because they haven't got the bandwidth to be able to deal with all the customs declaration forms, and also just understanding what needs to be done, because it's not that clear. And when you have, for example, this morning saying, HMRC saying we're going to wave wagons through on the 1st of November so that there's not a backlog at Dover. I mean, if I wanted a secure border, as people like Ian Duncan Smith said, I'd be slightly worried about that. And the situation is so difficult to predict, but I really feel for businesses. My gut says there will be an extension for 3 to 6 months. Whether there is a subsequent deal or no deal, it depends probably on a general election.
Well, John, that's a really good insight. Like you say, it's a political merry-go-round. It's a minefield information, and I'm sure for anyone listening to this, it will just probably hopefully give them some confidence that actually something is going to happen on the 31st of October.
Well, something will happen on the 31st of October, and I'll see you next year, and then I can explain why it didn't.
Lovely. I really appreciate you joining us
Thanks,
on PPMA
Andy.
TV. Thank you, John.